Thank you. So again, welcome everybody. Thank you for being here. You do not have to have attended the first in this training series in order to benefit from this one, but if you did, that's awesome. My name is Wendy Elmo, and I am a speech-language pathologist and brain injury specialist with BrainLinks. I've spent a lot of my career working in all of it mostly with brain injury, and I spent 20 years in a brain trauma unit working and doing cognitive linguistic therapy. So I'm going to be pulling a lot on that experience for this here today. So I work for a program called BrainLinks. We are a grant-based program of the Tennessee Disability Coalition, and we are funded at the federal level by the ACL and at the state level by the Tennessee Department of Health's traumatic brain injury program. We are a statewide team of brain injury specialists, and what we do is try to give you all what you need in order to work with people with brain injury. So that is working with people who are working with developmental disabilities and children and adults and schools and physicians. So we work really because brain injury is so pervasive. It is really in, whether you realize it or not, you're probably working with people who have had a brain injury, even if it was a concussion level. And so what we do is really diverse, and we provide a lot of educational materials. You can visit our website and find them there if you need to educate either staff or family or a person with a brain injury. And we have 4 toolkits at this point. 2 of them really relate to you all. One is for survivors, families, and caregivers. And that one is great to either give people the link and have them have the entire toolkit so that they can search around, or you can look for what it is that they need at that moment and give that to them. And then we also have one for service professionals, which is for frontline providers and case managers and supervisors. Lots of great tools that you need in order to work with them. And then we have a YouTube training channel, which has a lot of different all of our trainings recorded there and stored there. So what we're going to be talking about today is what cognition is, what are the different aspects of it, how ACEs or adverse childhood experiences can change the brain. We'll talk about cognitive interventions or accommodations. I'll also give you some communication suggestions. How do you communicate with someone who has cognitive challenges, and kind of also how do you give feedback? We'll be talking about that because I believe that kind of is an art. How do you do that and do it well? We'll go through a case and we'll discuss some resources. So cognition is, or our thinking is, lots of different aspects. It's our attention and memory, awareness, problem solving, judgment, flexibility, organization, reasoning, among a few other things. So what I'm going to do now is go through some of these main areas, and on the left, I'm going to tell you what it is, and on the right, I'm going to, for the most part, tell you what you can do about it if you do find someone who has a problem in that area. And you say, okay, well, why are we going to explain attention? Everybody knows what attention is, but attention is, we typically use it very simplistically, and we say things like, he has poor attention. And then I would ask, well, what kind of attention are you talking about? Is it his visual attention? If he's looking at something, he can't pay attention to it. Is it verbal, that if someone is speaking, they have a hard time paying attention? Is it task specific, where there's good or bad attention? So we often know people who have very good task specific attention. So they're great at maybe playing with their trains or coloring something, working on a very specific skill that they love. So we think, well, they can do it there. They must be choosing not to do it over here on this other thing that I want them to do. And that's not necessarily true. We can have very good task specific attention. We also, with attention, we look at, well, how long can they pay attention? Because that's a big factor for a lot of people. How much attention, how much information is coming at them? So is it really like a lot and dense? That can be very hard. Or how complex is the information? That'll also make it harder to pay attention. We look at the environment. Are there distractions? Are there not distractions? And what type of distractions are they? Are they visual? Are they verbal? Is there a lot going on all around them? And then we can break it down even further to look at sustained attention, just paying attention over time. And then divided attention is being able to pay attention to two things at the same time. So some people are really good at that. I would say I'm really good at paying attention to two different conversations that are going on at the table at the same time. But they say that we lose something when we do that. So so I might be able to pay attention in the moment, but I'm not really processing that really well, and I might not be able to remember it very well afterwards. Alternating attention is doing something like listening to a speaker and then taking notes. It's working on a project, stopping to answer the phone, and then come back and think about right now how many times, if you have your phone near you, how many times it might give you an alert that something's happening. We're having to do this alternating attention all of the time. Some people do that well. A lot of us are going to have an attention breakdown through that. We'll find that we're off on something else on our phone, or texting someone else back, and then it's harder to come back and re-engage with exactly where you were. So some things we can do if someone has an attention issue is we can get their attention first. So, and I relate a lot of this stuff also to our daily lives. You'll hear spouses that will say, they never listen to anything that I say. Well, it's not fair because you didn't get their attention first. If they're watching TV and you start talking, it takes a moment first to even realize that you may be talking to me, but then to pull me away, get me engaged with you, that can take a lot. So in our house, we have this kind of guideline that if someone's doing something like watching TV or even working in their office, that you say something like, hey, can I ask you a question? And that will allow us to kind of break it and bring them to us first to get their attention. We can work on the modality that is best. So maybe we're talking to them, but we can add pictures. We can model the behavior. So I can show you what it is that you need to do. That might help someone, and also helps learning in general. I can describe if it's a picture-based thing. I can describe, I can use my words. So kind of adding in what is not being used, but that helps them. We can shorten the length of time that we're speaking. We can give less information, simplify, we'll talk about later with language. We can simplify in a lot of different ways, like vocabulary, the complexity of what we're talking about. We can control the environment. And sometimes this is something as simple as putting their back. If we're out, let's say, in the mall and there's a wall around, I can make sure that my back is to the wall so that the person looks at me, sees the wall, and is not distracted by everything that's happening behind, out in the rest of the mall. We can control it in that way. I haven't done anything to reduce the noise, but at least we've reduced some of the visual distractions. So kind of thinking in that way. We can reduce the noise in some other situations. We might be able to turn down the volume on the TV, turn off the radio, ask someone else to hang on a second and stop talking, and then come back to that. Memory is similar in the sense that there's lots of different components to it. There's short-term memory, which is remembering something that I've just now learned. There's long-term memory where I now take it, put it into storage, and then I have to be able to retrieve it. I have to be able to pull it back. Working memory is more, think of it like you're working on a project and you have to pull in this fact, and then you have to remember what comes next, and then you have to remember where you were going overall. So it's kind of this ongoing process of pulling memory. New learning is something that is often difficult with people with brain injuries. It's hard for them to take in and learn that new information. So sometimes after an injury, you'll see that it looks like they're doing great. They go back to school, they go back to work, they're able to function. But over time, we'll often see by 1 year when students return to school that there's a gap now in their learning. They've gone from A's to C's because their new learning is not keeping up. You might see that someone at work, they have to take on a new task, and that new thing is just they can't learn that. Episodic memory is remembering, it tends to be more visual. You're remembering the episodes of your life, like the whole thing that you saw happening or that you were a part of. Procedural is like they always say, it's like riding a bike. That's procedural memory. We tend to hold on to procedures that we've learned and learned, over well, like riding a bicycle. Declarative is factual, and semantic is meanings. And so you can look at different people and see different breakdowns in these different areas. I want to just take a moment and say that I'll refer to brain injuries because that's kind of our focus, but what I'm going to be talking about throughout really will apply to uh, pretty much anybody with a cognitive challenge. So this could be developmental. It can also be a dementia. It can be that as well. A lot of it will still apply. So maybe be thinking about someone that you can apply these different things to. Or when I go through attention, have you worked with somebody who has an attentional problem, someone who has a memory problem? So coming back now to memory, we also have verbal memory and we have visual memory, remembering things that we see and that we hear. So some things that we can help other folks to do, and I always think about, well, what would I do? What do I do myself to make this thing easier? Well, we can write things down. If someone can't write, we can write it for them. We can repeat the information so that we're giving them a second chance to hear it, or a third chance over time. We can use lists and planners, pictures, cue cards, timers to help with memory. So a timer would come in where I have to remember something in the future. That's prospective memory, remembering in the future. That can also be really hard for people. So a timer can be a really good thing to use there. A cue card too can be something to sit in front of them. Phones. So phones have so much potential, right? A lot of us use them for setting timers and for controlling our schedule. The hard thing about that with people with an injury is that something has to make them remember to go to their phone. So if they do that, and or you can set up an alert, something like that, then that can be much more helpful. We can also use something like an Alexa. We can cue people where needed. We want to try not to be overly cueing, but when we kind of learn who they are, we want to just step in and give that little cue where they need it. We can use space rehearsal, which is a strategy that works pretty much universally for everyone, whether we've had injuries or not. So it's much better to study for an exam over a week than it is for us to cram, right? A lot of us probably learned that lesson. It helps for your brain to do something called consolidation. It takes it and it kind of packs it in and kind of organizes it. And spaced rehearsal allows for that. We can create procedures and routines. So because procedural memory is such a good one, such a strong one, if there are places where you can create a procedure or a routine, go ahead and do that. We want to find out what people's strengths are so that we use their strengths. So we're not always trying to fix what's the weakness. That's great, but we use their strengths. If they're great at visual, use that. If they're great at verbal memory, use that. And we want to be pausing for processing, allow the person to allow some of that consolidation to go on, to allow even just someone to understand the words that you just said, pause for it to be processed, and then move on to the next step. So this is just a simplified drawing to show you where different things are in the brain. And we're going to be talking a lot about things that are up in that frontal lobe. Some are in the temporal lobe, memory, language. Some of language is there in organization, but we're talking a lot about what's in the frontal lobe. And the frontal lobe is really subject to damage. And it is also, there are lots of connections between the frontal lobe and the other lobes of the brain. So even if there's another part of the brain that has sustained the primary damage, you'll see some frontal lobe issues because of that communication that maybe is not happening as well. So executive functions, they tend to sit in that the prefrontal cortex, the front of the brain. And they are, you've probably heard this term, it's really gotten a lot of attention in the last probably decade. It's the brain skills that you need to achieve a goal. It includes the higher order skills of initiation, which is starting something, planning, organization, controlling impulses, monitoring your behavior, and then flexibility to be able to change when you need to do that. So I love this pyramid for awareness. It's old, but it's good. It's simplified, and it's so accurate. And so we can have, I kind of added that at the bottom that says no awareness, because someone truly can have no awareness of what they're able to do. And that can be overall, that can be in a very specific area. I might know about a problem I have in one area, but not know about a problem in another area. If you kind of simplify this and think about with that no awareness, you think about someone who is paralyzed, just wakes up from a coma, and they then try to get out of bed. That's a lack of awareness. That's a lack of awareness from experience. They would have no way of knowing that was a problem. You can have intellectual awareness, which means I know that I have a problem with this. So you might hear people say, "Oh yeah, I have a bad memory," but they really don't do much about it. But they'll just say, "Oh, I have a bad memory." It might help if you think about people that you know, people that you work with, where you can say, "Oh yeah, I can see where they have intellectual awareness, but they don't have emergent awareness." And can you think of someone with emergent awareness, which is, I know I have a problem, and I know it's happening right now. I'm having a memory problem right now. I can't remember this. I'm having difficulty paying attention. They may or may not know what to do about that. So we have all that leveling to put in there as well. You might have someone who says, I'm having a problem with attention. Would you mind standing over there so it'll take all this distraction away? They may or may not know to do that. So we may have to jump in at that point to cue. Anticipatory awareness is, okay, I know I have a problem, and I know I'm likely to have this same problem here in the future when I go do this. So I'm going to be sure to take my phone. I'm going to be sure to set a timer because I'm not going to remember that it's time to take my medication. So that's a really important hierarchy to kind of understand. And again, awareness is not a singular thing either. It's all these different pieces to it. And I'll tell you that when I was working in the brain trauma unit, we had to spend a lot of time just working on people's awareness. Someone is not going to apply strategies if they're not aware that they have a problem. And you have to be very careful when building awareness, because if you're the one to point something out to that person, that can be really devastating. So if all of a sudden they realize, you're right, I have a memory problem, and what am I going to, their whole world can kind of shatter for them if we don't do that in the right way. So it means also kind of being gentle about it and offering strategies to get around it. So, um, I noticed you have difficulty with your memory in these types of situations, but I also notice that um, you do well when you take some notes. Um, it could be something like that, or maybe there is nothing that they're doing yet. You can say, I noticed that you have difficulty with your memory, but we have strategies that can help you with that. We're also always giving something that we can not be devastating about. So with an awareness problem, you want to help people to stop, think and plan before they act, and then evaluate. So I would often tell people, okay, you used to just act, and they'll usually, this is if there's a brain injury as opposed to something developmental. But if there's a brain injury, I'll say, you used to just act, and they'll, yes, yes, yes. I'm like, well, now you need to stop and think first. We need to have a plan. Then we need to execute that plan. We act, and then we evaluate. And then that evaluation becomes our plan for the next time. So we're always kind of thinking, at least, and if they say, well, that's too much, that's too much. We're just doing that for now until we figure things out. Then we're going to have these new skills that become automatic and are part of what we do. So in order to help with awareness, we can ask leading questions like, do you think anything is going to be difficult in what you're going to do? Do you have anything that can help you? So maybe that there is a strategy we've been working on, but or an accommodation. We're kind of gently cueing them to that without just saying, hey, you need to do this. You need to use this thing. Do you think you're going to need my help with anything? That is a great question to ask because it gets you in the door. Now you're not an annoyance when you come in and say something. You are a requested tool. So you want to kind of open that door, make a plan with strategies in place for any anticipated problems. So we think of a problem. Okay, what are we going to do about it? And then during that evaluation, we're asking like, well, how did it go? And if I can have the person say what was a challenge in that situation, I want them to say it. I don't want the critique to come from me. If possible, I want them to be able to, I really had it. First, you get a sense of their awareness, but also you're not the bad guy saying what's wrong all the time. Well, I had difficulty with this aspect of it. That's awesome. And they kind of look at you funny. Well, that's great that you know that. That's half the battle right there. That's awesome. Is there anything that could have helped you to make it go better? Any person? What would you like to do differently next time? Would you like me to remind you of that? Again, I get permission to get in there. And then again, always giving feedback gently, always with a way to make it better. I believe that metacognition, helping someone to understand how they think, is just a tremendous gift, because if you know what you're doing or how you think that I have great visual memory, but I don't have great verbal memory. Now we're giving them a way to approach the next task, to know what to do about it. I think in our school systems, we could be doing a better job of teaching children how they think, how they do what they do, so that they can take that and apply that to something else. So we might help them to be aware of their strengths. We really want them to understand their strengths. Sure, what are their weaknesses? And then what strategies or tools can you use to help all of that? We want to have an understanding of that. Next, heading into initiation, planning, organization, and completion. So initiation is starting something. And believe it or not, that can be an issue for people. And if you've seen it, you get it. When I first started working, I didn't realize that, no, this was a long time ago. You learned a lot when you went on to the job. And the first time I saw someone with a really true striking initiation problem, this was somebody who had had a stroke, and they looked great. They talked great. They could do different things. but their main problem was in initiation. So left to their own devices, they wouldn't do anything. So it created a huge problem at home. As you can imagine, he was married, and his, of course, there's always things to do around the house, and he would never get up and get off the couch. Now, they will, if the internal impetus becomes strong, the internal drive becomes strong enough. So yes, they will eat. Yes, they will get up and go to the bathroom, but that drive has to reach a certain threshold for them to go and do it. And quite honestly, the drive for cleaning the bathroom typically does not get that high for a lot of people. So they don't just get up and go do it. They have to kind of know this has to happen, and here's when I'm going to go do it. Planning, I think that makes sense to a lot of people. Planning something out, organizing things. That could be organizing your language. It could be organizing a project. It can be organizing a room. And then completion. Believe it or not, a lot of people have a hard time finishing something. They just don't have the drive to continue after an injury or a developmental situation. So things that we can do for initiation, because that internal drive is not high enough. We can't just say, you should have done it. You should have done it. Anything like that. That's not going to help. We can make a schedule that has clear start times. At 10 o'clock, this is what you're doing. We can use a timer. We can use an Alexa. They may be able to anticipate that they're going to need that and set it, but they may not. They may still need cues to know, okay, do you think you're going to remember to do that? Or, what do you want your schedule to look like? All right, let's set timers for each one of those things. And then if you're going to be the Alexa, if you're going to be the reminder, then you want to get agreement that you can remind them. Well, do you mind is that all right with you? Is that what you want for me to remind you? So that then when they say, you're being a pain in the neck, you can say, oh, I'm sorry. This is what you told me that you wanted me to do. Do you want to do it in a different way? And if you're not defensive, generally you'll diffuse it with them. And I'll tell you, maybe it was because I was the therapist, but like 99 times out of 100, they would say to me, oh, no, that's fine. Because you're reminding them of what they had said that they wanted and what they were willing to do. For planning, we can do things like using a planner. People don't use that as much. They tend to use their phones more, but we can go old school and use a planner or a wall calendar. Again, sometimes if they have that, somehow people are better at looking at a planner than a phone, because it's right there in front of you, especially if you have it open, or the calendars where they can see it. You can write down the steps to a plan and then check them off so that we know we're following the plan routinely. Just make it, even if things are going well, let's check our plan. Great, we're on track. Let's check this off. Let's check this off. Okay, what's the next thing? And go on to that. So you're kind of teaching that going back and using that plan. Use drawings or pictures. So let's say somebody has difficulty with their morning routine. They're always forgetting something. You can take pictures, and you can take the pictures of them if they want, and you can have them put on the bottom of the mirror. And you might want to move them around from time to time. Now they're down the side of the mirror, so that it's not just this thing that just becomes, we don't even see it anymore. We don't look at it anymore. So a drawing or a picture can be helpful. Also, the words can be helpful. This. So organization, we can do all the things that work for planning will tend to work for organization. We can, if it's a physical space, everything has its place, and everything is always put back in its place. I recently went to physical therapy, and the physical therapists, first I noticed it in mine. She was just like so, I wanted to call it almost compulsive about taking things and putting them. I used something and she took it and she put it back. And I thought, well, that's where everybody uses it. But there were like 3 different physical therapists in the place. So they always knew where that thing was. They didn't have to look around the room to find it. They didn't have to look at anybody's station to find it. They looked back where it belonged. And so creating that sort of a situation would be very, very helpful too, that everything goes back in its place. It's just what happens before you move on. You can color code things to make them easier to organize, that these things go here. Creating categories for things, magazines, books, dishes, whatever. And then you can use pictures also to show what goes where. So it can be on the inside or the outside of a cabinet to show where things go back in the kitchen. Now, much easier to have them on the outside so that you can kind of just scan from without opening everything. But sometimes people don't want that. You can write down all the right steps. Let's say organization is the problem. You can write down all of the steps, and maybe you just don't have them all in order, then go back and organize them. If someone is not completing tasks, you can do things like checking off all of those steps, and we're not done until we're done. You can have a photo of what done looks like so that they know when, okay, we're not, until it looks like this, we're not done. You can also give cues to keep on going. Okay, you just got a little bit left. Just got a little bit left. Awesome. You're almost there. Oh, you're done? All right. Did you get to this step here? Great. Okay. Or oh, great. Okay, let's go back and do that. So we have to look at when somebody's not getting their daily tasks done, why didn't it happen? It could be for lots of different reasons. One could be that he didn't have the initiation to get started in the first place. It could be that he was ready, he got started, but he couldn't plan all of the steps, or he couldn't organize all of the steps, couldn't organize the project itself and all of the pieces. He did start it, he just didn't get it done. So flexibility, reasoning, and problem solving. In extreme inflexibility or stuckness is called perseveration. And we tend to kind of really, really clear examples of it. You'll see in someone who has autism. So this could be the person who always wants to play with the dinosaurs or always wants to talk about the dinosaurs. But we also see it in brain injury. You can also see it in language. So you can see the perseveration come out there where we just keep on coming back to the same topic, or we come back to the same aspect of it, or we're using the same word. So that can be an inflexibility, a stuckness, or perseveration. Perseveration is the extreme. So with flexibility, if someone is really inflexible, there may be times when you can allow it, when it's not hurting anybody, it's not getting in the way of anything happening. Someone loves playing with their dinosaurs, or playing a computer game. As long as it's not hurting someone, it's not stopping from something else happening, sometimes we can allow that. And that same, sometimes it's giving them a comfort. So we have to recognize that too, that's why they're doing it. Now we also have to look at, like when we talk about things that include screens, that that is addictive. And so we have to kind of discern, when is it a cognitive inflexibility, and when is it this just I'm addicted to this thing right now, because we're seeing a lot more of that. And this next thing I think can be so helpful. Just remember, it's the brain, it's not the person. When you see an inflexibility, they're not trying to do that to you. They're not trying to bore you again with cars. They just, it's the brain. So we want to try not to get mad at them, not to even get frustrated with it. It's just the brain. It's just the brain. And we can sometimes brainstorm different ways beforehand to not, once you're stuck in the inflexibility, it can be hard to get out. But if we prepare for it beforehand to say, do you know what? This is where we're going now. And you tend to want to do your thing and not do the therapist's thing. So we're going to do the therapist thing first, and then you'll be able to spend 10 minutes doing your thing. That was something that I needed to do. I worked with with children in a school system, and even very young, when they learned that I had an iPad, that was the end. They didn't want to do anything else. And we just had to make a deal that that's not what we're here for. We're here for this, but I can give you 5 minutes or 3 minutes or 1 minute at the end to do your thing. So you have to kind of just play with that. So brainstorm different things before it even happens. Um, Reasoning, problem solving, we can use questions to assist. So what would you do next? So what's the problem that you're having? Try to see if we even know what the problem is, because if we don't, then we have to start there. Encourage them to think it through. What would happen? Let's keep on going with this. If we do this, what's going to happen out here if we did it that way? And then write down each part so that we can help with memory, because memory may be a problem as well. And it's going to be hard. That's where you can't really see if it's a problem with problem solving or with reasoning unless and until we know what are some of the contributing skills to that. And then with abstract judgment, perception, and abstract thinking are next. With judgment, we have to make sure that people are identifying all of the options, because they truly may have made the best decision based on the solutions that they thought of. So we first have to see what is their ability to generate like. And a lot of people with brain injuries and developmental issues and dementia have difficulty with generation. They can come up with maybe one, but it's the third thing that was really the right solution. So we might have to work on that. Give them all the solutions before you have them make a choice. So first identify all of the options, and I'll say even think of the silly things, because you're helping with generation with that, and then weigh all of those options. Help them to think it through to the end. What would happen if we did that? And then so sometimes it's, well, I want to say this. Okay, all right, that's an option. What will happen if you do? What will they say back to you? How will they feel? And then we can put it down on paper if that's helpful. What is the option that we're going with? Perception is making sure that they see it clearly. And this, we're talking now the senses. Are they seeing it accurately? Are they feeling it? Are they hearing everything? Because that's going to change what they do. If I haven't heard all of your information and I begin to act on part of it, then I may be incorrect in what I'm doing. We also have to make sure perception goes more abstract than that. It also goes to, am I really interpreting this situation? This can come into some social skills where I'm not reading the room. My perception of this is off. So we can help people to say, okay, well, let's take a look at their body language right now. What do you think they're thinking? And because that's going to change how I act. Abstract thinking is a very high level skill, and sometimes it's not achievable. That we have to realize how far we can take somebody, and then we might have to, when something is abstract, we may need to make it more concrete. We may need to bring it down to an understandable level. We have to be very careful of our figurative language and our idioms. So when we're talking in real figurative language, they may not understand what you're saying. They may be taking you at to mean exactly what you're saying, and that's not what you mean at all. So we have to be very careful with that. And we may need to just explain something to someone. If you think about if you're talking with someone who English is not their first language, you'd have to do this same part, not the abstract thinking so much as watching the figurative language, the idioms, and they may need you to explain, here's what they really meant by, don't let the cat out of the bag, because different cultures grow up with different idioms, different figurative language, and so they might need it explained. So kind of think of it like that in that same type of situation. So adverse childhood experiences. This is really worth thinking about and talking about, because they are pervasive. So a big study showed that traumatic events can have negative lasting effects on our health and our well-being, and even on our longevity, how long we live. And ACEs are things like living in poverty, living through a divorce or separation if you're the child, being a victim or a witness of violence. This is all below, I believe it's 18 years old. If any of these things have happened below 18 years old, if the child has endured physical, emotional, or sexual abuse, or even like the adult when they were the child, they've grown up in a family with mental health or substance use problems, a family member who's incarcerated, and there's a bit of a longer list. These are key ones that can change the brain, literally change the brain. We don't call it brain damage, but it is changing the brain, and it changes how the brain is going to act and behave and react. So when the brain is under stress, think about a child who they're not sure if their parent is going to come home drunk again, and if there's going to be violence in the house. They're living with stress. And what that does to the brain is it lights up that prefrontal cortex area where all of those thinking behaviors happen. And it also lights up the amygdala, which is our emotional portion of the brain. And it fires them up when we're in stress, and they're sending messages, and they're just lit up, and we can't think. The prefrontal cortex needs some quiet to think. And how fast we can recover from these messages firing back and forth, the faster we can make a decision. And we are more resilient if we have these greater connections between these two areas, and if we can quiet the brain. So think about someone who freezes in the face of danger. That's because there's messages are just firing, firing, firing. And think about someone who is cool under in conflict, or cool under stress. They've quieted that part of the brain. So the greater that, the more that we can work the prefrontal cortex, the more, and kind of to quiet the amygdala, the better we are. And we can deal with negative emotions. Now, also be thinking, if you work with children, we want to be helping them through to become resilient and to stay away from, ACEs whenever that's possible, not be involved in them. But at the same time, we have to be thinking, if you work with adults, a lot of them have gone through these ACEs. So they've had this change, and that might explain why you see kind of trauma responses to things, or not able to think through an emotional situation, or reacting with this big anger or frustration. It's because their brain has been changed. And because it changes the brain, it can lead to negative behavioral outcomes as an adult. So obesity, depression, alcoholism, heart problems, unemployment. We see these downstream. So we really want to be working on positive things and we have we run a collaboration called Tennessee Brighter Futures. And I'm talking from the negative side of this, the adverse childhood experiences, but through talking about this with the experts in part of this collaborative, we develop these resource pages, and they focus also on the positive. So you might want to go and check out those, the resource pages from the ACEs page. And I'm sure I'm sorry, Jen or Paul, I've got one or both of you scrambling to find the link to put in the chat. I apologize. I didn't warn you about that. I just thought of that right now. So children with ACEs much more likely to develop mood disorders, poor executive functioning, those skills that we were talking about. Their decision making is not great. They have poor judgment, poor impulse control. So we have to be thinking about that as well. Even if someone has not had a brain injury per se, they may still have a lot of the behaviors because of their adverse childhood experiences. We want to help them through that. So let's switch now to talking about language. So cognitive changes also impact language. Language itself may not be disrupted after a traumatic brain injury, might be after a stroke. There's still some debate about things like aphasia, but the language, someone can still talk and talk pretty well after a traumatic brain injury, but we do see changes in their language from their cognition. So let's talk about receptive language is listening and taking it in, processing that information. It involves the speed, and this will remind you probably of when I was talking about attention and memory. It involves the speed of the language coming in. It involves the duration, how long it went, and it involves how complex that language is. What is the vocabulary like? What is the grammar that they're using like? And so how can they so to help with that information processing that information, taking it in, we can do things like talk more slowly. We can pause more. We can use less information or less words when we're trying to explain something. We can simplify our vocabulary, our grammar, and the overall topic, if it's a complex topic. We can look to control the distractions, that comes up again. And we can check in to make sure that they've understood. And a strategy that we can teach someone too is to have them say, do you mind if I tell you back what you just said? Do you mind if I just check and clarify one thing? Get them to be doing it if possible. Receptive language, we also need to consider that distractibility. What is the environment, the ideal environment that they need? And recognize too that they won't necessarily ask questions. People will say, well, they didn't ask me any questions. Well, they won't necessarily do that because they don't even realize they didn't understand. Think about times when you've listened to the person, you've heard their words, but you did not take it in. You weren't taking it in, and maybe you still had your phone in front of you. Maybe you still had the TV in front of you. Maybe you were thinking about something when they came in, and you don't even realize you don't understand. Unless they say to you, you're not even listening to me. And we still have that ability our echoic memory, we call it, to go back, pull it back and go, oh yeah, you said this. But had they not said that, you probably wouldn't have it. So expressive language is talking. Someone might talk too much. And again, I would encourage you to think of people that you work with. They might talk too much, or they might talk too little. They're just not giving you enough information. They may be very disorganized in what they're saying. So it's just very hard to understand them because they're all over the place. They might be tangential, which is going off on a sidetrack, and they may never come back. So you don't ever get that first thing that they were talking about, or the sidetrack takes them to another sidetrack, takes them to another sidetrack. They might have difficulty finding the words. They might have simplistic language. They might not change their tone. They may speak very monotone, and they may have some perseveration. They may have some stuckness that you'll see in their language. So we can do things like provide some structure. So if they're talking too little, we might give a prompt like, tell me 2 things that you did today. If they talk too much, you might say, just give me 1 thing. So they're not just telling you everything that happened. Organizational cues are things like, well, what happened first? Oh, what happened after that? What happened after that? If they're tangential, you might say something like, that's really interesting. Because again, if we in our society, if you interrupt somebody, it is frowned upon. It is not it's not a good thing. So if you interrupt someone who has a problem with tangentiality, that can be perceived as very rude. So you want to kind of say, well, that's really interesting, but go back to where you started. You started with this. Usually they'll find that as helpful. That, oh, that's right. When I have someone, we take a lot of phone calls in our role, and we're taking phone calls often from people who've had an injury, and I try to get as best I can why they're calling me right up front, because then if they go off to other things, I can say, that's really interesting, and I think we need to address that, but I want to make sure we answer that first thing that was really important to you, which you told me was this. And that often is typically perceived as helpful, not being hurtful in any way. Word finding, if the person has a problem with word finding, you probably want to get some agreement about whether you can fill in the word for them or not, because sometimes it's very clear what they're trying to say. So you want to get permission, because again, you're cutting me off, and if you do that, sometimes you're making it harder for me to remember the rest of what I was saying. So it can be a bad thing. I went in on a consult with someone who finger spelled, and that was their mode of communication, and finger spelling can be slow. So generally you could, once you got the first part of the sentence, you could anticipate what the last part of the sentence was. And so I asked him, do you mind do you want me to jump in if I think I have it, or do you not? And if that, it then again, you've got permission. You want to be able to have that permission. So you stay on their side, you stay on their team, so you can help them more. I also would help people to understand what type of word finding strategy works best for them, so that now you're not just out there going, I can't think of the word, but you know to go, okay, let me picture it. Okay, let me think of the first sound or the first letter. Believe it or not, those are different kind of things. So that can help them, or we might be able to cue them to that. We can, if complexity is their issue, not always, I've not had a lot of success trying to help someone. If they're making their points and they're doing it with simple language, that's fine. That's fine. And then same thing with prosody, that can be a very difficult thing to change. So this is the sing-songiness of our voice. That can be very difficult to change. So again, we might want to just not just, it's okay. It's okay. Perseveration, we might redirect when needed. Like I said, I can bring the person back if they're stuck on something else, engage them in their topic when it's possible. And if they love talking about trains, maybe I go learn something new about trains, so that I've now changed the conversation a little bit, but it's still about trains, but I get to engage them in a new way. And I'm showing them that I'm interested in them. And again, remember, it's the brain. They're not trying to be annoying. With language also, we look at the cognitive problems, how they change the language. So I'll give you a couple of examples. With listening and understanding, let's say the cognitive problem was their attention and their awareness. Well, the result then that we see in their listening is that they're not understanding, but they're not asking questions because they don't even realize, they don't have awareness that they're not understanding. An example with expressive language, if the cognitive problem is that they're disorganized and perseverative, then we might see that when they go to retell their day, they're jumping all over the place, and then they come to just tend to keep coming back to this one event. They're not going through all of it. I love this model out of Colorado because it shows that there is a hierarchy to some of these things. So like I said, you can't really determine if there's a planning problem or how much of the issue that you're seeing in the moment is due to that planning problem if attention is the problem. If you take attention out, you're going to really just take the whole pyramid down. You're going to stop my ability to organize, to carry on a conversation, to plan, to do all kinds of other things. Same thing with memory. Take my memory out, and that's much difficult to do those other things as well. So we have to always be digging deeper when we see that there's a problem that someone is having. And sometimes it'll look like, let's say, forgetting. It'll really look like, oh, he's just always forgetting everything. Well, it might be memory. It might be that he did forget. It might be the attention. You cannot remember if you did not attend in the first place. It could be depression. It's really hard to remember things when someone is depressed. Often it's because they're not processing it in the first place. And this helps if you know the person. When my dad died, there was a time when you would talk to my mom and you knew she was not taking in anything that you were saying. So we kind of had to help her through that. if there was something that really had to get done or she really had to know. And probably many of us have experienced that. It could be that Charlie's forgetting because he's just not organized. He can't organize the information well enough to be able to remember it. It could be, like we said earlier, that he didn't forget at all. He just didn't start. And it could be something else. It could be a medication change, a recent trauma. It could be any number of things. So when we just a moment about challenging behavior, because we're going to be talking about behavior uh, in a whole other training in February. So when we see challenging behavior, just at this point, we'll say, keep in mind that the cognitive challenges that go along with that person, that could be impacting the behavior. It may be the whole reason. The whole reason is the cognitive issue that is creating that behavior. So just keep that in mind. And we'll talk a whole lot more about that next time. We need to identify the triggers. So we need to look at what is happening in the situation that we have this challenging behavior. What's happening communication wise? What's happening in that environment? What are the cognitive demands of that environment? And this is a trick question. Is the behavior communicating something? Behavior is always communicating something. So what is it communicating? What is that behavior trying to tell you? Involve the person in solutions and methods and practice alternative behaviors and responses, especially if someone has something with their brain. You can't just say, I told you, just do it this way. We need to practice that alternative behavior, the new way of doing something. So a lot of cognitive therapy is about working with people with brain changes is to learn their pattern over time, learn what is, how do they behave, what do they do, when do problems seem to occur, what seems to help, what seems to trigger. We have to be conscious of this idea of they won't versus they can't. We tend to look at people and we'll say, he won't do this. He won't put away his things. He won't. Maybe he can't. And we have to start there and think about, well, what can I do to see if it's just he won't versus can't? And sometimes I won't because I know I'm going to be terrible at it. I don't want to do it. I'm not going to do it if I don't have a way to be successful or to feel good about it. So my won't really is because of my can't. So we have to help people through their can't so that they will. These are things that make thinking and behavior difficult for all of us. So things like when we're tired, our thinking is harder, our ability to behave is harder. That happens. It's even more difficult for people who have had a brain injury or have a developmental brain change. So if we're tired, if we're under stress, if we're emotional, and that can be frustrated, angry, but it can also be, I'm so excited. That makes it more difficult for someone to think, to do what they need to, all those aspects of thinking. If we're in pain, it's harder. If we're sick, and if we're under the influence of drugs and alcohol, even if they are prescription. Let me go back to sick. I worked with a lot of people who were very high level, had mild traumatic brain injuries, very high level. And they would come in and sometimes they would say to me, I'm having a bad day and I don't know why. And we'd go through all this. Are you emotional? Are you stressed? We'd go through all the things to see what was making this day different. And they'd say, no, I'm no. And the next day they'd call out sick. It was that getting sick was enough to throw off their behavior. And so over time, I learned that about people, had enough people who would call out sick the next day after saying that it'd be like, so people, there's something going on already. So if you look on our website, the Personal Guide to Everyday Living with a Brain Injury, you can find this so I won't make Jen go and scramble, but if you go to our website, which is tndisability.org/brain, and you go into the section where if you've had an injury, this document should be under there, and it's everyday living with a brain injury. I used it over and over and over. It's probably also in the rehab section to help people understand what made their thinking or their behavior worse. So what in particular would tend to change things for them, and then what could they do about it? And that's a great document for that. So we need to gather lots of information to figure out what's happening with people. We need to look for those patterns in their behavior. We can look at notes, we can look at their file, see what other people have noted about them, what they're calling things like memory or attention. We can look at their medical file. One of the best places to go is if there's been neuropsychological testing. That is the gold standard for cognition. And if there's a neuropsych eval, it will show you all the different aspects of cognition, what's good, what's bad. They'll also tell you about some accommodations or strategies. They typically will also look at other aspects that we haven't talked so much about, like visual spatial abilities, things like that. And you can also look at cognitive linguistic testing by a speech language pathologist. So let's say you only have a speech pathology eval, but you don't have a neuropsych eval. Take a look at that. And if they're adept at working with cognition, they'll be pulling that aspect in as well. And so then we can take all of that information that we get from all of those places, and we can put it together in this brainstorming solutions tool that we also have, that we developed really for frontline practitioners, that you can figure out what's going on just by working with someone or by pulling from your files. You don't have to fill this out. It's 4 pages, but you can use it as a template. So what it really came from was the template that's in my mind when I go to work with anybody. I'm thinking about, okay, was that attention? Was that memory? Was that speed of processing? Was that awareness? I'm seeing an impulse control issue. And it goes through all of the different cognitive areas. And if you do want to write something down, you can do that. If you have a team, if you have like a day team and a night team, or there's other people that you work with, you can have them filling it out and putting their observations in as well. So it goes through all of those cognitive areas and language. It also goes through other areas like, well, we need to be thinking about, well, what's their vision like? Maybe it was a vision issue, their hearing, their motor ability, their fatigue, their social ability to perceive what's happening socially, their emotional state, their environment. It's just cueing you to be thinking about all of those things. And then thinking about, what are some recent changes? Has medication changed? And you might say, well, yeah, but that medication change happened 3 weeks ago. Well, some medications don't reach therapeutic level for days or weeks. So be thinking about that too. Was there a new injury, a new illness? What other things have happened? And did the problem that you're looking at get worse when whatever change happened? So it also looks at, well, what's the solutions? What can I do to support them? What are some internal strategies, which is what somebody does inside, like asking themselves a question, repeating things to themselves, saying, hey, did I get it? External strategies are things outside them, things like a calendar, a checklist, a timer, a picture, your phone. All of those things are external strategies. What external strategies might work? How can I change the environment to help them? And then always getting the person's input wherever you can. Sometimes they have just great insights into what will help them or not help them. And then again, if you have someone's buy-in, if you have their permission, then that can be really extremely helpful. And then you evaluate and you make a new plan based on what worked or what didn't work. You might need to give something a little bit of time before you change it. There's a kind of sister tool called the Strategies and Accommodations tool that says, okay, I found these problems from this tool, I've listed them, and now what kinds of things can I do about it? So this just gives you a few sample strategies for each area. So let's say you find an attention problem. It just gives you a few things to think about, so that you're thinking along the lines of strategy or accommodation. They're the same type of, mean the same thing. And then this has initials on it, so that if you're working, let's say there is an SLP, a speech language pathologist, that is on the case, or you have access to, it'll say, okay, this person is a good person to go to for these, for, let's say, an initiation problem. And I think I have, it's small, but it looks like, yeah, it's the speech pathologist and the neuropsychologist might have some good suggestions for you for that. And that's a few pages as well. So cognitive rehab, in a nutshell, which is not what you're expected to do, but in a way you are if you're working with someone with a brain injury. You need to first understand their cognition, understand their strengths and weaknesses, form an alliance with that person. I can't tell you how important building that relationship is. You need to get agreements around what the goals are and what the outcomes are and what the strategies are. They need to be a part of that. So it's not something that you're imposing. They can't get mad at you. They can, they will, they do, but they really can't get mad at you because it's their goal. We're open to changing that goal, but here's why you wanted that goal in the first place. So, we can talk about that. We can talk about a new strategy. Here's why we picked this one. Kind of being that memory for them. But that relationship is so important. It's probably the most important part of all of this, because you need to be able to be in a place to be listened to be seen as someone who is support, not trying to be the boss, not trying to be the mother or anything like that. You're really here with their best interests in mind to support them. And you have to figure out what level they need of support for each task. It can vary depending on what the task is. And then we need to develop those strategies. So it's kind of in a nutshell what we need to do. So let's talk about a case. Doug, he sustained a TBI from a car accident. He's usually very pleasant, but he has angry outbursts at times for unknown reasons. They happen in the kitchen during meal prep with others and out in the community. We looked at the meal prep, and usually the radio is on to keep things light and fun, and he often needs cueing to complete tasks to the end. We have to repeat directions to Doug, and he's slow to respond with his answer when he's asked questions, and he has weakness in his right arm and hand. So in the interest of time, I'll try to give you some suggestions. We kind of are looking what it's happening when there's a lot going on. So we might want to simplify the environment, get some of the noise out of the way. We might need to continue to cue him till the end, or we might be able to use a picture of this is what the end of his task looks like. We might give him a checkoff list that these are the parts that when these are done, then he's at the end. We might laminate that because we're working in the kitchen and we can just wipe it off and use it again in the future. We might be more aware when we're out in the community before we start to ask questions. We get everybody to be quiet, or we do it away from, if we're going into the mall, we say what we need to say before going in, kind of repeating rules and directions. We give him the time that he needs to respond, and we repeat information when he needs it. And then there's weakness in the right arm and hand. Maybe it's not anything I've said that causes the frustration. Maybe it's because he's not able to use his right arm and hand the way he needs to. And cutting things is difficult. So maybe he needs a rocker knife, and maybe he needs a cutting board that the food can be secured on, or a piece of that sticky placemat so that the thing doesn't roll. So we need to be thinking about the whole picture. We might give him a frustration scale, and this is really great with a lot of people, because it's best if we can think about it again before it gets too late. So we want people to be tuning in on a regular basis to, how am I right now? I'm a 1. I'm good. I'm happy. I'm a 2. I'm getting there. I'm frustrated. I'm not, totally gone yet, but I'm getting there. And then 3 is, it's too late. I'm done. I'm gone. I'm over the edge. So we want to be kind of tapping in, and we can get really good at seeing the signs with someone. So we can then step in with, okay, what are you? Are you 1 or 2 or 3? We can use this visually, or we can just, at some point they might know the scale and they're like, I'm a 2. I'm a 2. Okay, let's take a break from this right now. Or what do you need right now? And we want to, we want to get it before it's too late. And we want to have strategies along the way for what they need to do when they're different parts on that scale. It can be a great tool for a lot of people. This is that personal guide. It goes through all the different areas and gives strategies for that. And so just finishing up here, another great training that you can do is the Staff TBI Skill Builder. And I have the website right there. It's 14 modules online training program designed for frontline staff new to working with adults with brain injury across a range of settings. And then another resource is in Tennessee, the service coordinators that are part of the TBI program, they will help with a variety of different things. They might help find, let's say you need a referral, they can help you to find that referral. They can help you with treatment plans kind of things. You don't want to go to them with everybody that has a brain injury. Will overwhelm them. There are 8 across the state, but when you need to, they are there as well. We're here as well. We can answer questions, but they're your first line if you have a question with someone needs help. They have virtual support groups, which have been so successful. They started because of COVID, and they've been so successful that they've kept them going because transportation is such an issue with people with injuries. And then there's the Tennessee Family Support Program that offers up to $2,000. Sometimes this program runs out, so if you need something, you can go and you can look at eligibility on that website. And you could just Google Tennessee Family Support Program. It'll come up. So thank you for being here and for staying through. Then our next webinar is on February 8th. Hopefully, if you learned something from Jen in November or from me here today, you'll join us in that one as well. It's from 10 to 11:30 Central Time, and it's going to be on behavior and psychosocial changes following brain injury, tips, strategies, and de-escalation. So you can go ahead, you can go to our website under trainings, or you can go to this QR code and find it. Hopefully you'll join us there. And now at this point, we have about 15 more minutes. I'm happy to take any questions that you might have. And then I'm also going to put up this next slide while we're taking any questions. If you go to this, fill out the survey, it literally will take you 1 minute or less. You can get a certificate of attendance. It'll automatically be emailed to you. And we really, really value your input. So again, thanks for being here. Jen, are you seeing any questions?
Hey, Wendy, I'm checking it out. We've had so many good responses saying thank you, and we've had lots of great questions with everyone wanting the PowerPoint and the recording. So we've been updating as we go with that, but let's see. I'll just read a comment here. For those not in Tennessee, most states have family support programs and the guidelines vary by state.
Right. Thank you.
We had Heather say that this was so great. I can't wait to pass this along.
Great. And that reminds me, if you would like to include the recording of this in your training, if you have like an online training or a like Relias, some programs use, we are happy to get this to you. So just let us know, and you can use it in your training.
Heather asked if can anyone join the presentations?
Can anyone join? Oh, these? Sure. Oh, like next in February? Absolutely.
Yes, please send the link for our registration page on to anyone who would like to attend. This is open to all.
Yeah, I would imagine there were some family members that could have benefited from listening to today as well.
Yes, and we do have a question from Bruce. Does stress without other issues cause cognitive problems?
So it has to be at a certain level. So if we think of it has to kind of rise to that level of adverse childhood experiences kind of thing, where it's ongoing stress, it's intense, and it kind of puts them into that flight or fight mode. That over time will change the brain, yes. And it'll make that, it'll heighten the amygdala, and it'll make communication with the prefrontal cortex more difficult. And they might find that they're just responding always from that heightened place. So they respond with frustration, anger, rather than a nicely worded, calm response. But yes, it does. That's what we've learned from ACEs. I
Yes,
think
we're having lots of questions about the recording. Everybody wants to see this again. And I'll just say another little reminder for everyone who registered, you will receive a follow-up email. It'll likely be next week. And in that email, you will receive a link to the recording. And we're also going to post the recording on the same page where you registered. And we also have the PDF of today's presentation at the same place where you registered. So you can go there to register for the next webinar, and you can also get the materials from today. And we're going to send you an email too, so you'll have everything in one place.
Yes, the PowerPoint is not there yet, but by the time the email comes out, it'll be there.
And we actually got it up because we had so many requests.
Oh, beautiful. Wow. Look at you guys.
Yes.
Thank you. We're happy. So if you want to head out now, you're perfectly welcome to. If you want to hang on, I'll hang on and answer.
I'll read you one more question, Wendy.
Sure.
Someone said, is this presentation or future presentations appropriate to present to individuals who are not frontline workers, like grandparents, caregivers?
Sure. We talk to them all the time. You would have to just, I think I'm thinking about the language that I've used. I think I've talked in a way that they would explain it. Sure, I think it could be good. And I would try what I try to do if I'm dealing with like a specific family, then I try to tailor it specifically to that person. So I'll learn as much as I can about them so that I can give them examples so it makes sense. And when I'm giving a potential strategy to use, I'm giving one specifically that might work for them. Also take a look though, I'm trying to think on our YouTube training channel, just go and play there a little bit. I'm trying to think if there's anything that might be better or different than this. I think this is a really good one to explain just basically what cognition is, and I hope to take frustration away. We can get so frustrated thinking that somebody's doing something on purpose when it's really just their brain, and they can't, without some assistance, they can't do it in a different way, and it has nothing to do with us. And sometimes it does because we're not responding in a great way. So if we can take our emotion down, I think that can be really helpful for family members to know as well. It'll just make life easier for everyone if we can stay calm. Anything
Yeah, I was
else?
thinking the same thing, Wendy. It's exactly that question about how to share this and how to maybe make sure that it's appropriate. We have on our YouTube channel a lot of full-length trainings like today, but we also have some little short clips that if there was a specific item that you liked on the presentation that you want to see if we have more information, where you might just watch for 5 minutes and get a little more detail on how to use the tools.
And reach out to us if you have any questions. You can reach out to me. My email is not there, but it's Wendy_E@tndisability.org. Wendy_E@tndisability.org.
There you go. I got it in the chat.
I figured you would, Jen.
Yes, I'm taking care of it.
Thank you for your support.
We have a question from Rachel. Do people who don't have a known TBI exhibit these behaviors have a brain problem?
They can, sure. I'm trying to think of a situation where they wouldn't. So if someone doesn't have a TBI, but they're showing these things, it might be someone who has like long-term alcoholism that will change their brain. It could be the ACEs, the if they've lived a hard life, then that can change their brain. It will change it over time. Um, let's see. There are probably other psychological issues that um, make their brain different that might be a reason for them acting a certain way, for sure.
I had a couple more for you, Wendy.
Mhm.
First, I'll read John's. Being judged or dismissed is so hurtful because of not understanding my thought processes.
Yeah, yeah.
And then
And
Jackson had a comment or question, are there any resources to help pinpoint ACEs that people have experienced they may be unaware of?
yes, there is an ACEs quiz that you can Google. You'll see, or even just Google ACEs, adverse childhood experiences, and you'll see a list of them. What we have been cautioned about with that Tennessee Brighter Futures, it was a great meeting. I believe you can go and you can even listen to it on the Tennessee Brighter Futures link off of our site. What was really great about that, well, there were so many of the positive experiences first. I'm losing, the question was about, oh, do you have, know any? So what they cautioned us about was it can be upsetting to someone if you just read down this list of, were you ever sexually abused, and were you ever, uh, were were your parents an alcoholic? If you just read down that list, that can be really upsetting. So they talk about kind of putting it into the the questionnaire that you already ask, um, so that you're not, kind of really triggering somebody in just asking this list of questions.
Um,
Um, mhm.
there was, let me see, I have another one. Um, and I'm answering this one a little bit, but I'll also read it for you, Wendy. Would it be okay for Wisconsin to put some of this information or a link to this information on the Brain Injury Alliance website? Among so many things, we want to update resources available nationwide. So,
Absolutely.
and
Absolutely.
maybe start with our registration for the next webinar.
Yeah. So everything that we do is, being a grant-based program, is free and free to use. And there are some cases when we can also get you a document where, please leave our Brain Links kind of logo and attribution on the bottom, but you can sometimes put your own state's resources there. So take a look. I don't know that our brain health document has, I don't know that that has a lot of Tennessee on it to begin with, but you can take away anything that was Tennessee and put your own stuff. Hopefully, I'm not talking out of turn there, Paula. Paula Denslow is on here as well, but it's free to use. We've used other states' things and modified it with their permission. We'd love it.
We've got a few minutes left. I've got another question from Heidi. Is PTSD the same as ACEs?
So often, so let me first say I'm a speech pathologist. I'm not a psychologist. This is my understanding of it, that PTSD, often when we talk about it, is more in adult. And um, I'm, I would imagine that PTSD also changes the brain. It certainly changes how people react to things. Um, so I would say that they're probably similar. They certainly have a lot of similarities. Are they the exact same thing? I I couldn't tell you for sure.
Okay, I have another question from Emily. A family member explained they had a severe headache like none before, bad enough they thought about going to the emergency room because something was wrong. Months later, they have cognitive issues. Is it possible a brain injury could have occurred?
It is possible a stroke could have occurred, which is a form of an acquired brain injury. I would absolutely say that they should get to a doctor.
And Steve said he has seen older adults who've also had ACEs.
Yes. So unless we are, so you can have ACEs, you can have these things that happen under 18, and you can never experience negative outcomes from it because you've built resilience. You had maybe, and we do have on our YouTube training channel, fingers crossed that I'm right, a resilience training.
We
And
do.
then I would go and listen to that one, because we want to be building resilience in all of our people, whether they're children, so they never have negative outcomes from their adverse childhood experiences. So that's building the PCAs, the positive childhood experiences, to kind of outweigh those negative things. We can also, let's say we did develop, we had those ACEs, we're now an adult and we're kind of behaving from a place of ACEs. There's still things that we can do to become more resilient. And it's all on that, it's all in that YouTube video. It's also in a document on resilience under brain health on our website. And you can learn some of those things. So yes, you definitely can have ACEs when you're an adult. You have the experience of them. You're not gaining new ACEs because your brain is developed. So it's not the same thing. You're not gaining new ACEs. You're getting new traumatic experiences for sure, but it's not necessarily the kind that's going to do what the younger ones did. But you still want to build resilience. Hopefully that answered that question. You can feel free to email me. We're about a minute left. So Jen, if there's anything else.
I don't have any more questions. And for anybody who's still with us, we still got 100 on that would like to have a quick link to our YouTube channel. I just put that in the last comment that I added. Thank you all so much. Thank you for your interaction, and thank you for your interest in all the materials. And we really appreciate your time today. It's great to have you all.
Thanks, everybody. Hopefully we'll see you in February.